Hello and welcome to Leela's last win from the Premier Division, the game versus Houdini, game 159. We have a Sicilian Khan which started with e4, c5, knight f3, e6, and now we have knight c3, a move that usually leads into a close Sicilian, but now after a6 and d4 we go back to an open Sicilian position. Black exchanges the pawn, and now after knight d4 we are into the Khan variation. And here in this position Black would like to play knight f6, but this would run into e5 when Black's options are not very good. Here the knight could take, and Black's position is not very beautiful here. So in order to prevent e5, Black plays here first queen c7, and now the game continued with bishop d3, knight f6, castles, and now knight c6. The alternative is bishop c5. Both of these moves are attacking this knight, which is currently undefended. In this game we have knight c6, and after knight takes, Black has to make a decision how to capture here. He can either take with the b pawn, and then after queen e2 play d5, and then deal with a position where white plays e5 and so on. Or, as in the game, take with the d pawn and then play e5 and develop the light-squared bishop on this diagonal. This is the end of the book after d takes on c6, and here the best move for white is f4, with the idea to meet e5 with an eventual f5, blocking in this bishop and reducing its scope. Instead of f5, taking on e5 is not a good idea, because it's not the queen that will recapture here, but after knight g4 this knight will land on e5, and after something like queen e2, knight takes, bishop f4 is not really dangerous. Black will just play bishop d6, and Black is better. White has this isolated pawn on e4, so taking on e5 is not recommended. f5 is the way to go, but in this game Leela played first queen f3, and now we have bishop c5 check, development with tempo, and now only after castles did Leela play here f5, and her idea is to play g4, g5 and chase away that knight from f6. Houdini continued with b5. Maybe he wants this bishop on this diagonal, but it's a long way till that bishop can be active and do something useful. A lot of pieces need to be cleared first, but b5 of course is also useful for taking away this c4 square from this bishop. This could be dangerous, as we'll see a bit later. The game now continued with g4, and here human players played bishop b7, rook d8, and the third game in the database is with h6, and all these games eventually ended in a draw. In this one Houdini played knight e8, which is another logical move, intending to meet g5 now with f6. Now in this position white is not threatening yet to play f6, because after that Black can just simply take on f6, and even though after g takes on f6 his position looks rather dangerous, after king h8 Black has nothing to worry about, because moves like queen h5 are just nicely met by rook g8, and white can't really lift this king to h3 and mate on h7, because this bishop is guarding the h3 square, and Black also intends to play rook g6, and Black's position is fine. However, instead of f6, white is threatening actually queen h5. This is a much more dangerous approach to with the same idea of lifting the rook, but this time the f5 square is occupied by the white pawn, and the move like g6 is not really helping much. White can just drop back with queen h4 and still continue with this idea, and if g takes on f5, then after e takes on f5, now white even has knight e4 as an option. So f6 not dangerous in this position, but queen h5 is very dangerous. But anyway, after g5 Houdini played here f6, Taking on f6 here doesn't make much sense because the knight can now return to f6 and he's attacking e4, and it's not so easy to create threats on the g5. Black has very good lateral defense. Black's position is fine. Initially I thought that g6 here is not such a great idea because black can completely close the kingside. But this is actually not that great for black because h6 is a very nice target for this bishop. White can play queen g4 and then rook f3, rook h3, and then the sack on h6 is already very strong. So black can't really afford to play h6 in this position, so Houdini took on g6, but now after f takes on g6, this pawn is very strong. It takes away a lot of squares from that black king. And actually, white is already threatening here, queen h5 and queen h7 mate. And first I didn't saw what can black actually do here. How can he save himself? Because queen h5, queen h7 comes so fast, there's no time to clear the way. For example, after something like knight d6, queen h5 and rook e8, queen h7, king f8, check on h8, and then picking up this pawn on g7 is already very strong. But actually here after king f8, rook f6 is even stronger, because now if the pawn takes, then yes, the queen is hanging, but even stronger is actually bishop h6 with mate in 2. So clearing the way by moving away the rook and the knight doesn't really work. But what can black do then? I thought that maybe f5 then is the saving move here, with the idea to play knight f6 and guard h7, but here white just wins a pawn. After something like knight f6, he can even challenge the knight, and this is not really a position that black can be proud of. White has very good winning chances here. But what is Houdini supposed to do then? Well, he has one move which saves the game and prevents this mate. Pause the video if you would like to find it yourself. The move that Houdini actually played here is queen d7, and this stops mate now because of the queen h5. Black has queen h3, preventing the mate on h7, and actually if they exchange queens now, black is even better, because after rook f3 and bishop g4, there's bishop h5 attacking this pawn, and black threatens bishop f2 and so on. Black's position is much better. So here after queen d7, Leela played now a4, and she wants to win a pawn on b5. First of all, if this pawn takes or pushes forward, this allows this bishop to give this deadly check. The king can't go to the corner because then it gets mated. So the rook would have to sacrifice himself, and that would be game over. So the c4 square has to be guarded, and other than that, Leela is actually threatening here to take on b5, and this pawn is pinned to the rook, and if c takes on b5, then bishop takes on b5 is very strong, where again this pawn is pinned and the bishop is defended by the knight, and black loses a pawn. So here after a4, Houdini played knight c7. This defends both the rook and the b5 pawn so that he can now recapture on b5 either with the a or the c pawn. Leela now continued her development, and since these squares are not available now for the dark squared bishop, she decided to exchange this bishop for black's stronger bishop on c5. Bishop takes, queen takes, and now we have rook d8. And in this position again, I thought that rook f5 is a strong move here, shielding this diagonal and threatening again queen h3, queen h7. But actually black here has queen e8, attacking both the pawn and the rook, and black's position is okay. So rook f5, not the best idea. Leela played another move, bishop e2, which at first sight looks kind of mysterious, because now it looks like the black queen can get into white's position, d4 or d2, but that's not really true, because white has a very nice blow here. Pause the video again if you would like to find white's move here. White can play rook d1 and black loses the queen, because after queen takes, white mates the black king. So the queen has to take, and white wins the queen. So after bishop e2, of course, Houdini didn't dare to come down here, and he just removed the queen from the file. And now we have queen g3, again with this idea of coming to the h file and getting to h7. So we have now king f8, and Houdini's idea is that after queen h4, he also wants to play king e8, and if the queen goes in with check, then the queen can conveniently block on f8, and all is well for black. So instead of queen h4, this knight doesn't really like his current position, so he starts a little journey to the c5 square, and Leela played here knight d1, and now we have queen c5. The queen is coming to the c5 square. It defends e6 against threats like this, and it's also attacking on c2. Now we have a takes on b5, and here queen takes on c2 would be a mistake because black needs to guard these pawns here. Leela could just return with the knight to c3, and then she's threatening queen takes on e5 since this pawn is pinned, but also queen h4, and threatening to get into h8 and pick up the g7 pawn with check, since now the queen is not in position to block that check and defend the pawn. And from h4, this queen would also attack f6 and allow rook takes on f6, which would be completely winning for white. So we can see that there's a lot of pressure on the king's shield, and black has to be very careful. So instead of queen c2, Houdini recaptured here the pawn. Now we have rook takes, knight takes, and now we have queen h4, again trying to get in, and also trying to get in rook f6 here. For example, queen c2 again would just quite simply drop the game after rook f6. White mates after g takes on f6, queen takes, mate on f7 is inevitable. So after queen h4, we have instead king e8, and again preparing to dodge this check with queen f8. And the game now continued with knight f2. And here rook d2 doesn't quite work. Black is attacking here a lot of stuff along the second rank, but here Leela would have knight g4, a very strong move, and if the rook takes here, then after this check and queen back, knight f6 would be very, very strong. This is a check, and if black takes, then g7, and white wins. So rook d2 is not possible. Instead we have knight c7, the knight is returning towards the center of the board, and now we have knight d3, closing down this open file and preparing to get with the rook to the open a file and start attacking on the 7th and the 8th ranks. Taking with the queen on c2 fails again because of queen h8, of course, and after the king moves, queen g7, and white easily wins here very, very shortly. So instead of queen c2, this queen is attacked, and it also needs to guard f8, so we have queen d6. But now came queen h8 check, queen f8, and now queen back to h4. And after queen back to d6, we have queen h7 this time, again attacking this pawn, forcing queen e7. And now here in this position, Leela played this very nice b4 move, which allows this knight to finally jump to c5. At this point, they both evaluated the position at +1. Houdini continued with knight e6 to disallow the white knight getting to c5. Rook a1 now, preparing to enter black's position. Knight f8, trying to chase the queen away, also attack g6, but the queen pins the knight. And now we have rook d4, attacking both of these pawns. But taking those pawns is not really a very good idea for black. For example, if c3 now, then taking on e4 would allow Leela to play bishop f3, and after rook e3, the bishop can take on c6, and after king d8, there's knight c5, and so on. But even better than c3 is what Leela played, knight c5, defending the e4 pawn and giving up b4. But taking on b4 would be a big mistake, because now this bishop is helpless. The rook is not in position to go back and defend it. And after rook a8, there are too many pieces attacked here for black, and after the king or the queen defends the bishop, let's say the queen, Leela would have knight e6 with a double attack on this knight and also attacking the queen, and white would win here. Houdini could have a check here, but after that he would have to give up the queen and white wins. So rook takes on b4, not good either. Houdini played here f5, but now came c3, forcing the rook away from the fourth rank. We have rook d2, and now bishop d3 would be nice to shut out this rook from the defense of his king. But bishop d3 would allow here queen g5 with mating threats for black, and this would be very good for black. So instead of bishop e2, Leela preferred to come back with the queen and defend the bishop, keep the bishop on the second rank to block the rook's visibility, and also disallow g5 for the queen. Houdini now continued with queen f6, intending to take this pawn, and it looks like that maybe Leela has to play some passive move to defend the pawn, but no, the rook can now go to a8 and attack this bishop. The rook has to go back to defend, and now we have rook a7. And Houdini can now take this pawn, but taking that pawn has some very nasty downsides. First of all, if the queen takes, then Leela has queen h4 with a double threat of mating on e7 and also playing bishop h5, winning the pinned queen. And it's very hard to defend this actually. There's no defense because queen f6 would fail because of the same bishop h5 check. The king can't move, black would be forced to play g6, but this drops the queen. And what else can black do? He can try queen d6, this also guards the mate, but now white has rook g7 and bishop h5 again is a very big threat. So taking with the queen is not the best option here on g6. That's why Houdini took with the knight, but this is not so great either because now this knight is in a pin, and Leela will make very nice use of that pin. She played here rook c7, intending to sack this rook here and then take on f5, regain the piece and have a better position. So Houdini played here f4. Taking on e4 is not great because this rook sack on c8 still works. After knight e4, the queen is in trouble. He has to defend the knight, and if it goes to e6, then it runs into bishop g4, and black loses a piece here. So he has to be careful. F takes on e4 is not a great idea. However, he has here f4, and now the game continued with king g1, getting out of a possible check here, and we have now bishop d7, bishop f3, bishop back to c8, h3, some mysterious moves, at least for me. We have bishop d7, king f1, bishop c8, and now finally we have queen h7 attacking g7, but now came bishop d7 blocking the rook, and now rook a7, bishop h5 trying to win. This doesn't work because of this check, so we have rook a7, knight f8 attacking the queen, queen h8 again pinning it, and now Houdini goes for a queen exchange. Leela gives this check, and after king up we have queen takes, pawn takes, and now bishop g4. And it looks like black is okay. There are 3 attackers on this bishop, but black is also defending it 3 times. And black also has a protected passed pawn, so why is Leela better here? Well, here after king e8, she played a very nice move here. Bishop f5, controlling the knight, not allowing it to move anywhere. And black doesn't have many moves. The rook can't move because it has to defend the bishop. And if Houdini plays just passively like king e7, then Leela could continue with king g2, and after king e8, king f3, and intend to invade through the g4 square. And if h5, then just rook c7, and after king e7, take out the bishop, and then take on c6, and black's pawns will fall one by one. So Houdini can't really just sit and wait. So here, instead of king e7, he actually played the best move, which is to take out this bishop. But now Leela has a passed pawn here on f5. The game continued with knight d7, trying to exchange the knights, but now we have knight e4. And this knight is in a very nice position, it supports an f6. Houdini tries to exchange it, we have knight b6, rook h7, and now knight c4. He's trying to get this check in and exchange the knight, but now we have king e2. And at this point, Leela evaluates this at +2, which is pretty much winning, and Houdini says it's +1. We now have f3 check, trying to decoy this king here and invade with the rook, but instead of taking the pawn, Leela played king f2, and now we have rook d1, f6, knight d6, again trying to exchange the knights, but knight c5, and in this position e4 looks tempting, but actually after rook e7 check, black doesn't have good moves. If it goes to d8, then there's rook d7 check, king e8, and now f7 check, and black wins the exchange. After knight takes on f7, rook takes on d1, white wins. And if after rook e7 check, if instead of king d8, black plays king f8, then again knight e6 check, king g8, rook g7 check, king h8, and f7 wins the game. After e3 check, king takes, knight takes on f7, rook takes, check, king d4, rook takes on e6, and now rook takes on f3, and this king will go to c5, and white will win down the queenside pawns. So e4, although it looks tempting, is not working. So Houdini played here rook a1, and now we have rook e7 check, king f8, knight d7 check, king g8, king takes on f3, rook f1 check, king e2, and now rook f5. But here Leela wins now the e5 pawn. Houdini continued with king f7, and now we have rook e7 check, king g6, and now rook e6, defending and also attacking. But Leela is kind of walking a thin rope here, which could break any point. If black takes this pawn, then the game is pretty much equal. But Leela's rope is quite strong here. And now after rook e6 and knight c4, she took another pawn. We have h5, and now rook c5, going for a rook exchange, of course hoping for this when Leela would have another passed pawn. But Houdini didn't take. He played knight d6, and now we have king e3, rook f1, rook d5, knight f5 check, king d2, king f7, and after rook takes on b5, Leela wins another pawn, and it doesn't matter if it loses now the f6 pawn. These two connected pawns on the queen side will win the game. We have king e6 finally attacking both the knight and the pawn, but Leela has this trick with rook b8, and if this king takes the knight, then f7, and this pawn is going in. So the king can take the knight. We have knight d6 though, stopping the pawn, and now after knight c5 check, the king can finally take on f6. Rook f8 check runs into knight d7, but we have rook h8, king g5, rook d8, knight c4 check, king d3, knight e5 check, king e4, knight c4, and eventually Leela will stabilize the position and will push these pawns forward. We have rook d4, knight a3, rook d3, king g6, king d5, rook f5 check, king e4, rook f1, knight e6, king f6, knight d4, rook g1, rook f3 check, and after a couple of more moves we see that Leela gains some ground, and here eventually she manages to push the pawn forward. We have king e5, knight g5, rook d3, knight f7 check, and the pawns are advancing and they are unstoppable pretty much. The king is also far away, he's trying to come closer, but there's nothing stopping those pawns. And here now, after rook takes on g3 and h takes on g3, the game was finally ended in Leela's favor. A very interesting game. Now, in the end of the video, I would like to thank again to Adolf, Todor, Radu, and Guilherme for their contributions. Please subscribe, like, and share, and check out some of the other videos. Thanks for watching, and see you soon. Take care.